Okay, when we last left off, we had made our window, which is looking pretty good. Now I want to concentrate on this little side console over here, which is going to look basically like this. Okay, here we go. This is West Elm. There we go. There's our console. So I've adjusted the size of it to be a little higher so it's not such a low slung piece of furniture because it's meant to be a media console. But we're using it kind of as a buffet, but it's going to be the exact same style. So I'm going to use that as my reference, and I've just made the size whatever I want. Okay, so you can see we're going to have drawers here, we're going to have sliding doors over here, and then just these simple legs. And then we're going to have to map it nicely for the wood. Now I think what I'm going to do is just start from scratch on this and use this as the basic shape. And just show some of the modeling techniques that I would use here. If you want to know more about building furniture, and especially like organic furniture and just high poly furniture, I have a class all about that. And really it deserves its own class because it's a lot of information. But I'll show some basic tips and tricks here for modeling some furniture that is high poly but is not really organic shaped. So I think what I'm going to do on this one is just use the basic shell here. So let's take out everything except for the outside. Let's just delete that. And we'll select the border here and just come back kind of like that. And then we can cap that off back there. Okay, so there's the basic shell of our furniture. This is basically just a box with the front chamfered and then beveled in for that look that we want for the mid-century modern piece of furniture. Now, if you look at the image, which we will do, it's got these kind of rounded pieces. Well, just this one rounded piece that comes down right in the center here as a divider. That we will just create as a separate object. And you can see I split it into 3 parts, so I have kind of my measurements here. This can just be a renderable spline, but let's make it render with a lot of sides just to make sure that there's no faceting in that thing. And then we can turn it right into an edit poly or leave it however we want. And then we can just crash it in up here. Go to about right there and about right there. Okay, and then just put it into place in the top view. Make sure we're only moving in the X direction. Should be right about there. That should work just fine. Let's make sure. Yeah, I should have left it as a spline so I could adjust the diameter and make sure that's right. Now I could go here and scale it, but I think the diameter is luckily just about right. It's about 1 inch. I could scale it in just the XY direction like this to make it bigger still. Maybe we'll leave it like that to accentuate it a little bit. That looks good. Now we need to think about how this thing would be built in actuality. So let's say there's a divider here that comes back to the back, and that doesn't need to be editable. We can just go to the spline subobject mode here and maybe offset it. Go to outline, make sure we're on center, and we'll outline it from the center like that just to make a little rectangle that can be extruded. Make sure that's up in the right place right about there, and then extrude it. Now you can be a lot cleaner about where everything lines up and snaps to each other, but in this case we don't really need to. Let's make a drawer to sit in there and make sure to leave a little gap here. You don't want to snap there because you want to see a little gap. That's how it would be built, with the nice tight gap right there. Make those corners and just kind of eyeball it to right about there. Let's make that gap a little bigger so we can definitely see it when we render on all sides. And it's going to be about that size right there, and then we can just extrude, of course. Now a couple different things we could do. We can make the whole drawer like this. Let's do that, and then we can put it into place. This part is a little bit of overkill, obviously. We want to make this scene very high detailed, but making the actual drawer behind is overkill because there's just no way we would ever see it. But hey, we're going to do it anyway. Let's just turn that into a basic edit poly again. And I like doing that because then then it's all just about pushing and pulling instead of using modifiers so much, which I tend to find a little easier. Now, if this was drawer, let's see, well, let's make it an actual drawer. We don't want it to just be a box. This is the part that's really overkill, totally unnecessary. But showing you how to use all these tools is important if you don't know how. And again, polymodeling is something that definitely requires its own course, and I have courses that go over it in depth. Here I'm just giving you tips and tricks on how to do some basic furniture. So that drawer looks pretty good. You could put a slight micro chamfer on it by selecting the face, holding down Control, going to edge mode, and that will select all the edges around that face. Now this chamfer would be very small, because this is really, that's a little too small, but you want to see it in context about right there. Okay, this is modern furniture. It's got kind of crisp, sharp edges, so that looks great. And now, because this is just an edit poly, we can just simply copy it down as an element or as its own object and make the rest of the drawers, right? Make sure that gap is there. Now the bottom two, we will split the difference between this space here, and it's a little taller than the actual piece, so these drawers will be pretty big, probably right about there and right about there. So that's pretty good eyeballing. That'll work just fine for us. Okay, there is the front of the drawers. Okay, now these track doors over here, these sliding doors, let's make a little track for them, right? Let's go to our side view here, and let's just make a rectangle about like that, and then convert it to an edit spline. Go into vertice mode. I always like to make these all into corners, like so, and then get this in the right place, and we can just make that a renderable spline and go to rectangle, not radial, obviously. Let's slide it into place. It's obviously way too big right now, so let's just start adjusting till that track looks about right. Let's get that down to the right size. Continue to adjust, continue to adjust. Okay, that's not in the right place actually. So let's go back to our right view. Make sure our rectangle's in the right location. Make sure we're in sub-object vertice mode. Okay, I don't want it to be quite so thick still. Should just be a real tight little track for our door. And let's put it right out here on the edge like that. Okay, convert to edit poly, because we're going to use some poly tools again. I love the poly tools if you can't tell. So select that one edge there, and then we can just do a ring on it, like Beyonce said. Put a ring on it. You guys know about that. Okay, here we go. Yeah, ring and connect. So we went to the connect tool, brought up the dialog window, and we're connecting it twice. And let's slide it out to the edges like that, about like that. Okay, so if these are tools you're not familiar with, then this is a great primer for you. Okay, chamfer. That's not what we want. Okay, so those two, yes, that is what we want, chamfer. What I was starting to say is this is a great primer for you, just to show the basic ways in which you can use all these tools. They're all super handy. Okay, so we're taking those new loops we made and we're chamfering them just to spread them apart, basically. So now we have track 1 and track 2, and what we can do is take these edges, ring again, and what that's doing is selecting this one, the one over on the side, all the way in a ring, okay? Basic poly modeling stuff. Then hold down Control and select face. Okay, and that selects all the faces that are attached to the edges that I previously had selected, which is exactly what we want. And now we extrude it slightly, ever so slightly, by local normal. Okay, it'll start at 10 by default. If you right click on that, it'll set it to 0 for us, and then we can go a little bit negative. Okay, so right about there. Okay, now we have our tracks for our doors. perfectly set up. And in the next video, we'll add the doors, we'll add some hardware, and we'll add some legs.